On a rock off the southern tip of Sakhalin, in water that throws spray up past the third floor, there's a lighthouse nobody has lived in since 1990. That year, the Soviet Navy took the keepers off and left a nuclear battery running in their place. What almost nobody knew was how many of those batteries existed, and that the Ministry of Defense would later admit it had lost track of some of them. 10 places today, from the Baltic to the Kazakh steppe. Number 1 is that lighthouse at Cape Aniva, and it kept turning for 16 years with nobody inside. The first Soviet reactor to put electricity into a public grid was called Peaceful Atom, and the design underneath it became the template for the reactor line that ended at Chernobyl. In 1954, though, it was a small brick hall with a chimney in a town full of physicists. Number 10. Obninsk, Kaluga Oblast, Russia. An hour and a half southwest of Moscow, you come to a town of research institutes and pine trees. And inside one fenced compound, there's a low building that looks like a provincial swimming baths. Inside, there's a control room with rotary dials and a wall of switches, kept as a museum. This is AM1, Atom Myrny, the peaceful atom, run by the Institute of Physics and Power Engineering. Construction started in 1951. The reactor went critical in May 1954, and it was connected to the grid on the 27th of June. It produced 5 megawatts, roughly enough for a couple of thousand homes, so it was never really about the electricity. It was about being first, and about the 17 experimental loops inside the core, where the Soviet Union worked out how to push a submarine along with a reactor. It was also a graphite-moderated, water-cooled channel design, the same basic architecture as the RBMK reactors at Chernobyl. The plant ran for 48 years, but by 2002 it was subsidized and pointless, and Minatum's deputy minister Nikolai Shingaryov told the Norwegian environmental group Bellona that the shutdown on the 29th of April was for purely economic reasons and that Obninsk would become a museum. It did become a museum. The reactor stayed in the building. When Bellona covered the decommissioning hearings in 2018, 16 years after the last shutdown, the work of taking the core apart was still unfinished, and much of it was still classified. 2,000 kilometers west, the Soviet Union left something rather larger, and it is 30 meters from a beach. Number 9. Sillamäe, Estonia. Drive east from Tallinn for about 185 kilometers, almost to the Russian border, and you reach a small town of Stalinist boulevards on the Gulf of Finland. At the northwestern end, past the seawall, there is a low green hill covered in grass. It's the only hill on that stretch of coast, and it was made by people. Sillamäe was a Soviet uranium town. The plant started work in 1948 on local dictyanema shale, then on far richer ore shipped in from Czechoslovakia and Hungary, and uranium from Sillamäe went into the first Soviet bomb in 1949. The town was closed and did not appear on maps. Estonians only learned what was there in 1989, through press reports quoting the scientist Endel Lippmaa. In 1959, the plant opened a tailings pond directly on the shoreline to take the waste. By the time it stopped, that pond held roughly 12 million tons of uranium and thorium residues, heavy metals, acids and oil shale ash, spread across about 50 hectares in a mound up to 25 meters high. At its nearest point, it sat 30 meters from the Baltic Sea, behind an earth wall. Then Estonia became independent in 1991, and inspectors went and looked at the wall. Erosion had cut channels through the face of it. There were no monitoring wells, no engineered drainage, and no overflow capacity, and a serious storm surge could have put the contents into the Gulf of Finland. Estonia and the European Union spent 10 years on it. The dam was reinforced, a seawall built, the surface capped to hold down radon, and the pond sealed under clay and soil. The work finished in 2008 and cost roughly 24 million euros. Surface readings came back to natural levels. 16,000 people live in Sillamäe. The waste is still under the grass, 30 meters from the water, and it isn't going anywhere. Number 8. Metsamor, Armenia. 36 kilometers west of Yerevan, on a flat agricultural plain with Mount Ararat filling the southern sky, there is a Soviet power station and a Soviet town built to serve it. The town is the strange part. Wide planned avenues, blocks of flats, and gaps where the rest of it was supposed to go. The Armenian nuclear power plant began construction in 1970. Unit 1 came online in 1976, Unit 2 in 1980, both of them VVE R440 pressurized water reactors. The town of Metsamor went up alongside for the staff, and it was still being built when everything stopped. On the 7th of December 1988, an earthquake destroyed the town of Spitak in the north of the country and killed at least 25,000 people. The plant is 75 kilometers from the epicenter. According to the World Nuclear Association, it kept running normally and took no damage. But nobody believed the reassurances. This was 2.5 years after Chernobyl and the lies that came with it, and Metsamor sits in one of the most seismically active regions on the continent. Both reactors were shut down in 1989. What followed is remembered in Armenia as the dark and cold years. A blockade closed the gas pipelines, the lights went out, people burned furniture and felled the trees in the parks, and hundreds of thousands emigrated. So in 1993, the government took a decision no country had ever taken. On the 5th of November 1995, after 6.5 years cold, Unit 2 at Metsamor was restarted, and 400 megawatts went back into the grid. No shut-down nuclear plant anywhere had ever been brought back to life. Unit 1 never restarted and is being decommissioned. Unit 2 is still running today, upgraded by Rosatom, with its license extended toward the 2030s. The reactor came back. The town around it never did, and you can still see where the unbuilt blocks were meant to stand. Number 7. Zheleznogorsk, Krasnoyarsk Krai, Russia. 50 kilometers north of Krasnoyarsk, on the east bank of the Yenisei, there is a road with a barrier across it and a granite ridge behind. Behind the barrier is a city of around 85,000 people that did not officially exist until 1992, when it stopped being Krasnoyarsk 26 and got a name. It was founded in 1950 as Combine 815, later the Mining and Chemical Combine, and its job was weapons-grade plutonium. What makes it remarkable is where they put the plant. The reactor halls, the radiochemical plant, the laboratories, the storage and the ventilation all went inside the mountain in a multi-level warren of tunnels 200 to 250 meters under solid granite. 3 graphite reactors ran down there, AD from 1958, ADE-1 from 1961, and ADE-2 from the mid-60s, cooled with water drawn out of the Yenisei, and for the first 2, discharged straight back into it. The secrecy did not work as well as the engineering. The spoil from all that tunneling was dumped on the surface beside the site, and an American photographic balloon picked the place out in 1956, years before it was finished. AD and also ADE-1 were shut down in 1992. If you are enjoying these, hit subscribe, because there is a list like this waiting in every corner of the old Soviet map. We will get to the one with people fishing in it shortly, but there is something on the Barents coast to deal with first. While the reactors under the granite were winding down, the same country's navigation network was quietly falling apart along the Arctic coast. Zheleznogorsk is still closed today, and you still need an invitation and an approved reason to pass the barrier. Number 6. The Kola Peninsula Beacon Chain, Murmansk Oblast, Russia. Follow the Barents coast west from Murmansk toward the Norwegian border. and you pass headland after headland with a concrete post on it and a ribbed metal cylinder about the size of an oil drum bolted to a plinth beside the light. That cylinder is a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, and it holds a capsule of strontium-90. The idea was sensible enough. The Arctic coast has no power lines, the winters are dark, and a beacon that runs on radioactive decay needs no fuel and no keeper. So the Soviet Union built more than 1,000 of them and scattered them along the Northern Sea route, the White Sea, the Baltic, and Kamchatka. Bellona reported 132 nuclear-powered lighthouses along the north coast alone. One of them sat a few dozen meters from the Norwegian border. Then the state that installed them stopped visiting. Maintenance schedules were skipped, paperwork was lost, and the Ministry of Defense eventually admitted it could not say where all of them were. In November 2003, a Northern Fleet inspection found Beacon 414.1 at Olenja Bay in the Kola Inlet, stripped to pieces. Scrap thieves had taken the stainless steel, the lead, and the depleted uranium shielding, and left the strontium core lying in the open, throwing out around 1,000 Roentgens an hour. Murmansk regional officials classified it as a radioactive accident. Norway, the United States, and Rosatom spent the next decade tracking the units down and pulling their cores. Officials declared the Kola Peninsula clear of them in 2008, and by 2015, Rosatom said the great majority nationwide had gone. Remember that cylinder? In 1990, somebody bolted one of these to the floor of a lighthouse 9 stories tall and walked away. Number 5. Muslyumovo and the East Urals Trace, Chelyabinsk Oblast, Russia. On the bank of the Techa River, in flat country north of Chelyabinsk, there are villages with vegetable plots running down to the water and cattle standing in the shallows. Until 2006, there were no signs on the bank telling anyone what was in the river. Upstream sits Mayak, the plutonium combine built in 1946 that made the material for the first Soviet bomb. Between 1949 and 1956, it discharged about 100 petabecquerels of liquid waste directly into the Techa, which was the drinking, washing and bathing water for dozens of villages downstream. Then, on the 29th of September 1957, a cooling system failed on a buried tank of high-level waste at Mayak, and the tank exploded. Residents of the district saw an unusual bluish-violet colour in the sky, and the regional press speculated about the northern lights. Within days, people were being ordered to slaughter their livestock, bury their crops, and plough their fields under. More than 20 villages were evacuated and demolished, and around 11,000 people were moved. No announcement was ever made. The contaminated ground became known as the East Urals radioactive trace. On the international scale for nuclear events, the accident is rated level 6, and it is the only level 6 event in history. Muslyumovo was not evacuated. It sat on the river through all of it, generation after generation, and its resettlement finally ran from 2006 to 2012. Residents were moved about 2 kilometers upriver, and Bellona has reported for years on villagers who could not prove the link between their illnesses and the water, and on cleanup workers from 1957 who cannot get into the archives to prove they were ever there. Rosatom moved the people. It could not move the river. Number 4. Lake Karachay, near Ozersk, Chelyabinsk Oblast, Russia. Beside the Mayak plant, there's a flat grey plain with a service road across it and a fence around it, and it looks like a quarry floor that somebody tidied. There is no lake. There was, and its name meant black water. On the 7th of August 1951, the decision was taken to use Karachay as a dump, and it was renamed Reservoir Vive 9. Between 1951 and 1953, the open-cycle reactors put high-level waste straight into it, and medium-level waste kept going in for decades after. A study in 1993 found the lake emitting around 120 million curies, with sediment at the bottom that was essentially high-level waste several meters deep. Then came the drought. In 1967, the water level dropped, the mud dried, and the wind picked it up. Radioactive dust from the lake bed was carried across an area of roughly 1,800 square kilometers, over villages, gardens, and rooftops, and estimates of the number of people affected run to about 500,000. That was the point at which the Soviet Union decided the lake had to stop. From 1978 to 1986, engineers dropped nearly 10,000 hollow concrete blocks into the water to pin the sediment down, then filled and covered what was left. The final filling was completed in 2015. It is worth understanding why. In the 1990s, measurements taken 10 meters from the water's edge recorded 600 Roentgens an hour. 100 Roentgens will make you ill. 400 will most likely kill you within the month. An hour on that shoreline was a fatal dose, delivered while you stood there doing nothing. Oleg Tarasov of the Mayak Central Laboratory has said it is not dangerous to be near Karachay today. He also confirmed that economic activity on the land is forbidden, entry is prohibited, and Rosatom guards watch it. Number 3, the Semipalatinsk Polygon, eastern Kazakhstan. 150 kilometers west of the city of Sillamäe, the steppe runs out flat to the horizon, and standing on it are concrete towers, instrument bunkers, and the stubs of buildings put up to be destroyed. This is the Polygon, 18,500 square kilometers of it, an area about the size of Wales, and for 40 years it was where the Soviet Union tested its bombs. It opened at 7 in the morning on the 29th of August, 1949, when a plutonium device called RDS-1 was fired from a tower, and Igor Kurchatov, who had run the Soviet atomic program since 1943, gave the order. 456 nuclear tests followed, in the air, underground, and in horizontal tunnels bored into the Degelan Mountains, ending in November 1989. A quarter of all the nuclear tests ever conducted on Earth happened here. The test site itself was empty. The land around it was not. Kazakh experts estimate 1.5 million people were exposed to fallout across those 40 years, most of them never warned and never evacuated. And the government today recognizes more than 1 million citizens as affected. Nursultan Nazarbayev closed the Polygon on the 29th of August, 1991, 42 years to the day after the first shot. But the handover was not a handover. According to the Nuclear Threat Initiative, Russian scientists and security staff left quickly without telling the Kazakh authorities where many of the tunnels and boreholes were. Between 1996 and 2012, a joint Kazakh, Russian and American operation quietly went back in to secure waste plutonium left in the mountain tunnels. Almost none of it is fenced. Herders graze cattle and horses on the steppe. People pick wild strawberries, and guided tours in protective suits run out of Kurchatov for $1,000 a day. Number 2, Lake Chagan, the atomic lake, eastern Kazakhstan. At the eastern edge of the Polygon, there's a circle of water 400 meters across, ringed by a raised lip of earth 20 to 38 meters high. From the air, it looks like a meteorite crater. It is not one. It was dug in a single second on the 15th of January, 1965. The Soviet Union had a program called Nuclear Explosions for the national economy, which was its answer to the American Plowshare project, and the idea was to use bombs as earth-moving equipment. Chagan was the first and largest shot in it, A 140 kiloton device was lowered 178 meters down into the dry bed at the meeting of the Chagan and Ashkisu rivers, positioned so the crater lip would dam the spring flood. It worked exactly as designed. The blast threw out a crater 400 meters wide and 100 meters deep. The rivers filled it, and the reservoir behind it holds around 10 million cubic meters of water. It also did something not in the plan. Roughly 20% of the fission products went into the atmosphere, and the plume was detected over Japan. The United States protested that this breached the Limited Test Ban Treaty signed in 1963. The Soviets replied that it had been an underground test, and the amount released was insignificant, and the matter was eventually dropped. 61 years later, the lake is still there and still measurably contaminated. Published figures put the water at roughly 100 times the permitted level of radionuclides for drinking water. Tourists are taken to the rim in protective suits and told not to touch anything. People fish in it anyway. That's 9 places built, filled or blown open by a state that no longer exists, and every one of them was somebody's project with a budget and a completion date. The last one on the list was a favour to shipping, and it's the tower from the start of this. Number 1. The Aniva Lighthouse, Cape Aniva, Sakhalin. At the southern end of Sakhalin, past the village of Novikovo, the road stops and the only way on is a small boat through open swell. 2 hours later, you come around a headland, and there it is, growing straight out of a rock called Sivucha at the foot of the cape, striped white and red, 9 floors of concrete standing in the sea with nothing else in the frame at all. The southern half of Sakhalin was Japanese then, governed as Karafuto Prefecture, and this stretch of coast had fog, currents, submerged rock, and a long record of wrecks. The engineer Miura Shinobu designed a tower for it. Construction ran from 1937 to 1939, with every sack of cement brought in by sea because there was no dock, no warehouse, and nowhere for the workers to sleep. What they finished is a 31-metre concrete tower with its light 40 metres above the water, visible 35 kilometres out. The lower floors held stores and the radio room. Floors 3 to 5 were living quarters, with bunks for 12. On the top floor, the lens turned on a clockwork mechanism driven by a 270-kilogram weight, which fell slowly down a shaft through the middle of the building, and the keepers wound it back up. When the work was done, a small model of the tower was presented to the Japanese emperor. The Soviet Union took the whole island in 1945 and ran the lighthouse through the Cold War, with crews living inside it. Then, in 1990, the Navy took the crew off and bolted in a strontium-90 generator. Aniva was one of 132 Soviet lighthouses automated that way. The light went on turning above an empty building, over empty rooms with the bunks still in them, for 16 more years, until the battery finally ran flat in 2006. By then, GPS had made the tower more or less redundant, so nobody fitted a new one. The generator was recovered, the valuable equipment was taken off, everything else stayed. What came next was the scrap men. The metal fittings were stripped out, and the sea has been working on the rest ever since, coming through the lower floors on every storm. The Russian Geographical Society announced a restoration in 2015 that never happened. Tourist boats still run out from Novikovo in calm weather, and the tower is now a candidate heritage site. The bunks are still on the 3rd floor, and the shaft the weight fell down runs the full height of a building the sea now walks into on every storm. What stays with me about all this is the housekeeping. The beacons on empty headlands, the pond 30 meters from a beach, the tank buried under a field near Chelyabinsk, and a lighthouse on a rock with a battery in it that outlasted the navy that fitted it. None of these are places to go. Karachay and Muslyumovo are restricted and guarded. Zheleznogorsk is closed. The Polygon has no fence, and needs none of your curiosity, and Aniva is a ruin in a cold sea, 2 hours from the nearest road. None of it was ever meant to be dramatic. It was somewhere to put the waste, a beacon that ran without a keeper, and a battery in a lighthouse because a battery was cheaper than a man. Subscribe and we'll go and find the next 10. Thank you.